Welcome back to the Anaheim Calling Podcast. I am delighted to welcome you for our third season covering the Anaheim Ducks.
Mm-hmm.
We are basically on the eve. By the time you'll be listening to this, if you're not one of our live listeners right now on Twitch, by the time you're listening to this, we will be about a day away from Ducks hockey returning. And so the season is upon us. Today, we are going to do a season preview of the Ducks. It'll be not your traditional season preview. We're mostly going to discuss the roster that came out today, the final roster with all the final cuts, and that will lead into some talk about where we see the team finishing, so on and so forth. But due to the fact that this is our third season and we really want to take this thing as far as we possibly can with the podcast, with the things that we can offer to our listeners, we're actually doing a drive on our Patreon page where we're giving you different ways to support the show, but we're also doing it in a way where it will actually benefit you. So, Jake, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit more about that and how they can kind of work through this?
Yeah, so for those of you watching the live stream of this or looking at this on YouTube, you'll see now on your screen I've moved to our Patreon page where you can actually see the different goals on your screen. And basically, the purpose of this is for us to basically give you more and more stuff. And these goals, if we hit them, we'll be able to do more things. And I do want to make mention of this, that this is, some of these are going to be October only. And so, well, not necessarily October only, but we want to try to hit these during October. And so if you are a patron as of right now and want to add to your pledge, so instead of being $5, you want to make it $10 for this month, that will all go towards this goal. And so our first one is going to be $350 per month, and if we hit that, we're going to give you a Patreon-exclusive watch party where pictures of beers will be on us. And with this goal, if it's met during October, like I had said, then all of our October patrons, along with patrons at the time of the watch party, are welcome. So if you decide you just want to become a patron to help us out with this goal and give us $1, for instance, you can go to that watch party. So if you just want to help support us this month and drop off because of your own financial situation, that's fine. And if we meet this $350 a month goal, then you can come to that watch party. And so this is going to be something that we're going to do with all of the different types of live events that we're going to do with this goal. And so at $350 a month, so we're currently at $251. So we just got to get $100 or $100 more to hit that. And then if we hit 500, we'll do a live Patreon exclusive show. So we'll, at a brewery or somewhere, we'll set it up so that only patrons, and like with the watch party, if we meet in October patrons can be there. It will be a Patreon exclusive live show for all of you. And it's going to be a really good time for Felix and I to kind of do this thing in front of all of you. And you can all see kind of what a mess Felix and I can be as we're doing this in person. And
Yes. How much water I drink.
Yeah, exactly. $750 a month. This is the one that is going to be a big one. We will add another bonus episode. So if we hit this, we will bump up to 3 bonus episodes a month. And so if we hit 750, we will go to that. So you'll get even more bonus content. So if you have friends and want to get them out there and get us up to 750, all of you will get more content because of that. At $1,000 a month, we'll host a watch party and we'll have a live post-game show for that. So similar to the Patreon exclusive live show, this will be a watch party along with that live show afterwards. And then at $1,500 a month, our loftiest goal, our big stretch goal, that if we can hit this, it would kind of blow my socks off, and it would just kind of show me how much of an impact we've kind of made, Felix. But we will give you 4 bonus episodes a month. And this is where Felix and I will really be able to make it worth our while to be able to give you that extra bonus content, because we're doing a lot of these podcasts outside of the Patreon. So if we can get up to that much, we'll do 4 of these for you a month. And that's basically all of the stretch goals that we have. And so with the start of the season, with the start of the month, we wanted to kind of set this up for you as stretch goals for all of you to kind of help us hit.
Absolutely. And just to kind of recap what our Patreon page is currently offering, so that's at patreon.com/acpod. We'll put a link to that in the description of this episode. But basically right now we have 2 tiers. We have the $1 tier. For $1 a month, you can just show your support. You get access to our patron-only Discord chat. So when news breaks, when guys get traded, sent down, whatever the case may be, we can all kind of react to it together in the Discord chat. We have another tier, which is $5, and that is where not you get the same access to the Discord rewards, but additionally, you get 2 bonus episodes a month. And if you're a big fan of the show, I highly recommend this second tier, only because the additional episodes, they're all over the place. So sometimes they will be just us talking about the NHL as a whole, or getting into some more nitty-gritty Ducks topics. And other times they're just totally off-topic, kind of crazy fun. They're not as serious as we can be on the regular show. And it's a fun little change of pace for us. And I would assume that if you're someone that's supporting us on that level, this is probably an aspect of our gig that you enjoy. And so definitely a little something for everyone, both with the $1 tier and the $5 tier. So like Jake said, tell your friends about it. Spread the word. We are trying to grow this thing.
Yep.
Anything else you want to add here?
Nope. For instance, though, to kind of build off you saying that we do a lot of random stuff, I think last episode we had a pretty solid debate about candy bars.
Well, yeah, because there was that tweet that went viral.
Yeah.
And there was a selection of candy, and it was basically you have to get rid of one for your whole life or something like that. Or if you, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and
that led some pretty spirited debate.
Yes. And for those of you watching on Twitch right now, our good buddy JC Caster Y4SO, former managing editor, former host of this specific podcast, threw in the link in the Patreon. And on top of that, I do want to make mention that it's come to my attention with regards to the Twitch stream that first off, we've got Joshua's Data and CMonkey001 both resubbing to the Twitch stream. CMonkey's at 9 months for us, and Joshua's Data's at 3 different months. So thank you guys so much for that. But I did want to make mention that we actually have 5 emotes, and that's come to my attention. And I'm going through and I'm updating. I don't think it's updated yet, but we have a new one coming in to replace the Jack Hughes one. So for anyone out there that wants to use that Jack Hughes emote more, you only have a little bit of time because it's essentially been deleted. But if anyone has any ideas for new emotes, new badges, different things like that, let me know. We can try to put together some new stuff for the emotes and make this chat even more hectic and a good time.
All right. So on that note, thanks everyone for bearing with us there. And once again, that's patreon.com/acpod. Let's get into the hockey. Season is back. Mm-hmm. We're, like I said, on the eve of the Ducks starting their season against the Arizona Coyotes on Thursday. And there's already quite a bit to get into, although, of course, we're all through now the preseason games, taking a look at those. But we have got some roster movement. And today the Ducks released their finalized opening night roster. And there were a few surprises, to be sure. Now, let's get into how we got here. So on Monday, or yesterday, since tonight's Tuesday, it was announced that one kind of surprising name and one very surprising name were placed on waivers, and that would be Sam Carrick, who some maybe saw making the team just because of how he was utilized by Dallas Eakins in San Diego last year, as well as Daniel Sprong, a guy who is not waiver exempt. So sending him down to the minors, he has to go through waivers first, possibility of him being claimed by another team with basically no compensation for the Ducks whatsoever. Sprong, as you'll remember, was a guy that was acquired last year in exchange for Marcus Pettersson at a time where the Ducks needed a little scoring help when they were going through their 2 wins in 21 games or whatever the number was. And so it was a little odd to see Sprong's name on there. What was your reaction to Sprong hitting the waiver wire?
Ooh, throwing me in the hot spot right now.
Just lobbing you up a grenade here.
Seriously. I mean, to be honest, I hated it. I mean, I'm not going to lie. My personal opinion on this is asset management is key in the modern day NHL. It's something that is very, very important for a general manager. And so I looked at it as if this was a risk, and it wasn't exactly a risk worth taking. Because to me, the risk is you lose this player for free, for nothing. The benefit to that risk is you can send him down to the AHL. is that really worth taking this risk? Now, granted, you could look at it and basically say it was a calculated risk because everyone else is going to be on waivers. A lot of guys are going to get through waivers more so now than later on in the season. So maybe this was a move done so that they could send them down and call them up and send them down and call them up. Because if you remember, waivers are not required anymore once you've cleared waivers for either 10 NHL games or 30 days on the NHL roster. So they could really drag that out if they wanted to for a lot of the season for Daniel Sprong. But just in my personal opinion, I didn't exactly view it as a risk worth taking for a guy that you gave up a pretty decent prospect for in Marcus Pettersson. And granted, it worked. It may change my view long term if Daniel Sprong comes back and he has renewed energy and going down to the AHL was good for him. But, I mean, just looking at it from the pure asset management perspective, it just didn't feel like it was a risk worth taking. When you have a guy like Max Comtois, who, as we'll get into this more, but he made the team, you have a guy, Max Comtois and Max Jones, who are both waiver exempt and could have been sent down with without waivers being required, and kept Daniel Sprong on the roster, maybe found ways to get him into games. It just felt like it was, like I said, a risk not worth taking.
Right. And so it's a bit of a different scenario when you place a guy on waivers this time of year, as opposed to during the middle of the season. Every team is trying to figure out its roster. And so a lot of teams, there's almost this agreed upon, I'm not going to compare this to nuclear warfare, but there's like a mutual destruction that's kind of agreed upon. And so everyone sends down their guys that are not waiver exempt at the same time. And hardly any of them get claimed, because if you're sending a guy down, it means that you're basically angling to have your roster set. And so if your roster is to be set, you're not then going to turn around and add another contract to that. And you have to hit cap compliance. There's a whole lot of things that go into it. And so although, yes, I will agree with you that there was a risk and the optics were bizarre, just considering that Daniel Sprong, 14 goals in 47 games as a Duck last year, clearly had I would say reasonably promising season. I think that I don't want to say that we're blowing this out of proportion, because clearly, however you feel about it, there is objectively a risk. I do think that this time of year is the time where you can get out of that. Now, there were, I mean, by my count, there were over 30 players placed on waivers on Monday, and there were some names in there that were decent players, and only 2 of them were claimed today, and that would be Eric Comrie of the Jets, Winnipeg Jets, the goaltender. I may have lost track of what team he was on, and Carl Dahlstrom. So, and there were names in there like Josh Hosang that were also pretty recognizable. Sven Bershi is another guy, and so look no further than the Edmonton Oilers lineup, their opening night lineup, to wonder how no team managed to claim a guy like Daniel Sprong, because the Oilers' wing depth is not the prettiest.
Their depth chart's bad. It's really bad.
It's bad. And so you would think that a team like the Oilers would be interested in a Daniel Sprong, but for whatever reason, for all the reasons that I just named, I should say the fact that everyone's doing it at the same time. And also the next thing I want to kind of get to, Daniel Sprong was, I won't call him a regular in the lineup last year, but he was as close to it as you can be. And he's not going to be on this team to start the season. How did we get here? What did you think of his training camp? Because Daniel Sprong's place in this lineup was there for him to get if he had stood out to Dallas Eakins enough. So how did we get here?
Yeah, I actually think his underlying numbers were pretty good. I think
they were very good.
I think the issue that maybe the coaching staff is going to have for him is it's kind of a numbers game. Although the weird thing is, and we'll get into this more, but Ondrej Kase is hurt. And that's the kind of craziest thing out of this all, is that kind of gives them a built-in role to put Daniel Sprong in a top 9 position where he can do well for the Ducks, basically. Because to me, the way that this would make sense is if they were wanted him to be on the right side and not have to play the left wing, he would have had to play in a 4th-line role. And the only thing that would have made sense is Dallas Eakins would not want him in a 4th-line role because he didn't think he can contribute. He doesn't exactly play the style of game that you expect from a typical quote unquote fourth line winger. He's not exactly the most defensively responsible player, but he scores goals, and scoring goals is very hard in the NHL. And if you have a guy that can do that, put him in a position to succeed, surround him with players that can help him and do that defending for him, and then you're probably going to see the benefits of it. So I don't know if it was exactly his preseason play was that bad. I almost just think that there isn't exactly a good role for him, and he needed to kind of bust down the door with scoring a lot of goals during the preseason, because I think that's the only complaint you can have is his production wasn't there in the preseason.
Right. Now, here's the thing. So I do want to see what Daniel Sprong can do in a stable environment, but he's making it hard to really, I guess, believe that will work out. And what I mean by that, if you look at the games he played last year in Anaheim, here's the list of guys that were worse than him in terms of even strength impact by the Evolving Hockey's goals above replacement. Max Jones, Andrew Cogliano, Ben Street, Corey Perry, and Ryan Getzlaf. That's it. His defensive impact at even strength was negative, and there was a really long list of guys, 19 guys in front of him that had a better impact. So although, yes, he does score goals, it's kind of hard to make an objective case that he puts more on the table than he takes off. Now, again, circumstances, all the caveats I want to throw in there. But again, the objective case for him actually being a guy who has the potential to be not just a guy who can score, but a guy who can contribute at 5-on-5 and kind of keep up. Mm-hmm. I think it's difficult to make. And of course, I could go on and on with other numbers, but we only have so much time. Yeah. Now, if you look at his numbers in the preseason, they were very good. One thing I will point out, though, is there were definitely more than a few instances where either he was caught on a back check or was out of position. And look, Dallas Eakins, for all that people want to crown him as a forward-thinking coach, I certainly think he is in many respects. But those things do stick out in a coach's mind, especially when there's a numbers game involved, especially when you have a roster to build. And when you get caught on a turnover that leads to a 2-on-1 against the Kings where Dustin Brown scores and doesn't look like you're necessarily skating the hardest. I don't know. Maybe that just sticks out in a coach's mind when they're making decisions. And so for all of those reasons, I do think we will see him back in the NHL this season. And I certainly think he still has a lot of potential, but I wasn't really ready to sound the alarm bells when this happened. I don't know. That's just me, though.
Yeah. Just kind of looking at some numbers for anyone out there. In terms of shots on goal per 60, he was third on the team behind Silfverberg and DeLeo, but DeLeo barely played in the preseason, so that can kind of be thrown out. In terms of shot attempts, he was first on the team in terms of shot attempts. In terms of expected goals, and this is all per 60 to try to... because no one's going to play the same amount during the preseason.
Yeah, he played 3 games.
And he was 5th on the team in expected goals. So he shot the puck a fair amount, and he got shots off in pretty decent places. So it's not as if he didn't do what he's good at. And I don't know. I just don't know what they were exactly looking for him. I don't know if maybe they, like I said, they were expecting him to score a lot of goals, and that was the way he was going to have to make the roster. I mean, here's the question for you, because the way I viewed it, at least at the time, and granted they played different sides, but from a pure roster construction standpoint, it came down to whether they wanted Comtois or Sprong on the roster. Who do you think had a better preseason?
I mean, it's so hard to say because I don't think that Comtois had a great preseason.
I don't either.
I also don't think that, although Sprong had the numbers look good, I mean, was he one of the guys that stood out night to night?
That's true.
And then the question that you have to ask in all this is how much do those games actually matter?
That's also true.
Some nights you're playing against AHL lineups. It's really hard to say. So I don't know. I don't know really how to weight the preseason, which is why I'm glad it's over. We can start getting real games to talk about. So on the other side of our first break here, now that we've discussed some of the notable cuts, we've only talked about one. We are going to get into the actual guys who will be on the ice come Thursday night. So we will talk to you on the other side of this first break. Okay, back from our first break. So any last lingering thoughts on Daniel Sprong here before we move ahead here?
How long do you think it will be until he's called up with the Ducks?
I think it might be a while.
Really?
I think we will see him back. I'm very confident in that. But the next guy up is going to be Andre Kasha once he comes back
Mm-hmm.
from recovering from his injury.
Yeah.
I mean, do we even really know what's ailing him? I think he got hurt against the Kings again.
Yes, Jeff
Or
Carter caught him with an elbow.
yeah, man. I mean, this is, we talk a lot about how he's injury prone, but you don't want to hold that too much against him. It's becoming a theme, and again, it's through no fault of his own, but that's just kind of the nature of the Andre Kasha experience. So I think, like you're kind of hinting at here, a lot of it depends on how long Comtois and Jones are going to last.
Mm-hmm.
But Comtois, and I guess we're getting out ahead of who made the team, but Max Comtois and Max Jones will be on the opening night roster. And I think more than them potentially earning it, I don't want to downplay how they performed in the preseason. I think that the team just there's a greater benefit to finding out what they have in these guys. And you could argue that that's a very subjective way of looking at it, because ultimately, yes, the Ducks did not draft Daniel Sprong, but he's still in that category of 23 and under guys who they probably would want to find out what they actually have in them.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just not the way organizations work. Jones and Comtois were pretty highly touted draft picks. They came up with a lot of fanfare. And so it's time to find out what these guys have. And I think that it's perfectly defensible, especially as a team that probably wants to make the playoffs, but realistically would stand to benefit more from just learning more about its core. I think it makes a lot of sense for those guys to come up. And so because they made that leap, because they decided, hey, this is what's important right now, it just makes me wonder when Daniel Sprong's next turn will be.
Fair.
Because clearly it's not being evaluated on necessarily how they're playing. If Comtois and Jones are clearly struggling, I'm sure that they will spend time at some point in the AHL, but that could take a while for that to happen. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, who knows how injuries are going to hit. Maybe Shore gets hurt. Maybe it becomes a situation where they need to call him up. They need to have goal scoring in the lineup, and that might be where the call-up comes. Maybe it's a situation where they want to let him play a couple games, or not even a couple, 10 to 20 games down in the AHL. I do think it could be a situation, though, where he ends up tearing up the AHL and if he has maybe 10 goals in the first 20 games, I could see them calling him up.
Well, that's the thing, is that Daniel Sprong is actually a pretty big get for the San Diego Gulls.
100%.
Because the Gulls roster this season is not what it was last year, just loaded with top prospect talent. That could obviously change throughout the season, but Daniel Sprong is a very good AHL player, if nothing else. In 17-18, he had 65 points in 65 games for the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins with 32 goals and 33 assists. And he did that. That was in his first season, in the AHL. So he's probably going to end up being too good for the AHL at this point, at least from a production standpoint.
It's funny. We I think because of the trade, and this, I always have to kind of remind myself of this, but Daniel Sprong's the same age as Troy Terry, and he is only a year older than Max Jones and Sam Steele, and 2 years older than Max Comtois.
He's a young player.
So it's not as if he's kind of a finished product right now. And so it could be a situation where going to the AHL, as much as I disagree with the putting him on waivers, where long-term it could be good for him. And he may find his game, maybe figures out under Kevin Dineen how to be a little bit more defensively responsible and can come up and become more of a mainstay with the NHL team. It really is kind of funny, though, when you think about it, because a lot of people talk about Sprong in the way of him kind of being this established player with and almost seeming like he's older than he actually is.
Right. Well, that's the thing. He's a young player, but he did get NHL time pretty quickly, as opposed to Troy Terry. I mean, in 15-16, he played 18 games for the Pittsburgh Penguins, so that happened pretty fast for him. And I think that what was difficult for him is that he, obviously as a young guy on a team like the Penguins that's trying to win the Stanley Cup every year under Mike Sullivan, there's not a lot of margin for error in terms of cracking the lineup. And that can take some of the shine off of the prospect pretty quickly. So I actually think that going down to the AHL could be really beneficial for him, because if nothing else, he has the opportunity to make a case that, hey, I have no business being down here. And from there, he's going to have to force management's hand. And look, if Ondrej Kase, he's already been in a trade once. If you look back to the Justin Falk trade that never happened between Carolina and Anaheim, if Kase, for example, gets traded later down the season or something like that, there's an opportunity there for Daniel Sprong. Daniel Sprong, by the way, who is an RFA at the end of this year. Mm-hmm. So no matter how this season goes, the Ducks still hold pretty much all of the cards. Man, we've spent quite a bit of time talking about Daniel Sprong.
By the way, kind of on that topic, not going into questions just yet, but I think it's relevant. Joshua's data brings up, if Sprong tears it up early, does he come up fast?
I don't think so. I don't think that's going to No, because you have to also it's a two-sided equation. It's if Daniel Sprong produces at a high level in the AHL and one of or both of Max Jones don't produce or don't look like they're ready, then you see him come up. I don't think it's just a matter of he performs and they have to call him up.
Yeah.
There's just too many variables for that to be the only deciding factor.
Fair.
Okay,
right.
let's get into the team.
Yes.
I can't believe we spent this much. This is what happens when we don't podcast in a few days. There's a lot of thoughts that have accumulated and that need to be put out there. But let's get into the team. I'm just going to read off the roster if you don't mind. So up front, you've got, as we've already mentioned, Max Comtois, Nicolas Deslauriers, Ryan Getzlaf, Derek Grant, Adam Henrique, Max Jones, Ondrej Kase, who is on the injured reserve, Isac Lundestrom. We're going to get into him in a little bit because him making the opening night lineup to me is the surprise so far of the Ducks season. Rickard, Rakell, Nick Ritchie, Carter Rowney, Devin Shore, Jakob Silfverberg, Sam Steele, also an injured reserve, and Troy Terry. On the blue line, Michael Del Zotto, Cam Fowler, Brendan Gooley, Corbinian Holzer, Jakob Larstrom, Jesus, Hampus Lindholm, Josh Manson, and then in net you've got John Gibson and Ryan Miller.
So
that's your team, folks, as of right now.
We should make mention that after the last preseason game, there was some concern about Brendan Gooley and John Gibson's health. Both of them are healthy and not on injured reserve to start the season.
Yeah, so that's definitely a good sign for Anaheim, especially because Brendan Gooley is a pretty important piece on that second pairing. Him and Cam Fowler have looked really good together. But let's get into Lundestrom here because, like I said, I think it's the surprise of training camp. Yeah. So one thing that kind of clouds all of this is the fact that Sam Steele is hurt, and the timeline seems to be a little open-ended. Any specifics on that for his injury?
I have not actually seen anything for his.
I think it's a mid-body injury.
Yes,
is that correct, or was that Gooley? I don't know.
And Cap Friendly was reporting that it is season opening IR. So I haven't exactly seen if that's retroactive to a certain point in time or not. So with IR, there is a certain amount of days that you have to miss once you're put on IR. I'm trying to look really quickly. Sam Steele was put on season opening IR. So give me one sec if you want to vamp for a quick second and try to figure out how long that actually goes to.
Yeah, well, he got hurt, I believe, against the Kings in the preseason.
Coyotes,
there you go. So the two games that were not televised. And, so him being hurt obviously created the spot that Isac Lundestrom is now taking up. But that being said, Lundestrom looked fantastic in the preseason, centering both Rickard, Rakell, and Jakob Silfverberg. And he's still only 19 years of age. We're going to be able to see what he looks like now with basically a full-time NHL role, and not just like we saw last season where Lundestrom is more of a third-line guy, a depth guy. He's going to be playing, presumably, we don't actually know what the opening night lineup will be, but if preseason is any indicator, he's going to be playing against some true offensive talent. He's going to be used in a role where he could produce offense and show a bit of his two-way game. I do think, though, that I was wondering about this, why wouldn't they put, for example, Adam Henrique in that spot between Rakell and Silfverberg? You would assume that maybe he's a little better suited for those bigger minutes, that bigger role. I think maybe the opposite is just that Lundestrom, you don't want to put him in the third line role and have to carry a line or have to play with maybe lesser skilled line mates. So putting him between a really good 5-on-5 guy like Silfverberg and a pretty tried and true skater like Rickard, Rakell, it just makes more sense to put him between some established guys as opposed to maybe another youngster or whatever the case may be. Any update here on the injury reserve situation?
So season opening injury reserve is something for a two-way player and has to do with getting actually some cap relief. For a regular injury reserve, the player's ineligible to compete in NHL games for a period of not less than 7 days. Players on injury reserve may attend club meetings and meals and all that good stuff. So
and meals.
Yes. So it's a minimum of 7 days from the date of the injury. So it's going to be basically, I think they can take him off at any point in time, seeing as the injury was over a week ago.
Okay. Yeah. So obviously it's unfortunate that we're not going to be able to get a feel for Sam Steele early on, but we'll have plenty of opportunities to.
Correct.
What do you make of Lundestrom making the team?
I think it makes somewhat sense because of the fact that I'm not really sure who else within the system could have come up. I guess maybe you could have moved Devon Shore over to center, but I mean, I've said this a couple times. I think that the Rakell Silfverberg wing pairing can really drive play and almost insulate the center. And I think it's a great spot to put a young guy in. I think we saw it with Sam Steele at the end of last year. We've seen that in preseason so far with Isac Lundestrom, with those two guys kind of making his life easy. They're able to do a lot of the work for him and kind of allows him to kind of find his legs and get into the game. And so in that sense, it makes sense why they want to have a guy like Lundestrom between those two as compared to having Lundestrom with, let's say, a Nick Ritchie and a Devon Shore, because maybe Isac Lundestrom will have to do a little bit more of the heavy lifting there. And also with Rakell and Silfverberg, it allows Lundestrom to get into more of an offensive role and try to distribute the puck around. Whereas I think Henrique is a player that they more trust on the defensive side of the puck, and so that can be really good for a potential lineup with Nick Ritchie and Devon Shore. And just for reference, I believe people are reporting, I think Renaud Lavoie was the first reported that it's supposedly going to be Comtois, Getzlaf, Terry to start the season. And I believe that we'll probably get Rakell, Silfverberg, Lundestrom. We'll probably get Shore, Ritchie, and Henrique, and then probably Delorier, Rowney, Grant. I believe is kind of what I've seen floating around as the lines. Maybe Max Jones finds his way onto the lineup. Not quite sure.
I would imagine Max Jones will play, only because if he's not playing, there doesn't seem to be much of a point of him being on the team.
Maybe
I don't know.
Maybe they flip between him and Comtois, but I'm really not quite sure where he fits if you have Comtois, Rakell, Ritchie on the left side, and you also have Delorier, who they paid we've said, paid a 4th-round pick to get.
Well, I think Delorier could actually be the extra forward. I think he may be the guy who sits out. Because if you have Ritchie, Rowney, and Grant as a 4th line, the Grant kind of brings that down a little bit, but Rowney and Ritchie is a pretty good duo for a 4th line.
I'd agree.
That's actually a pretty workable 4th line. So
backtracking slightly.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say then you can put Jones on the 3rd line next to Henrique, which I think is what we'll see.
Okay. Backtracking slightly, though, to Lundestrom.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if he really impresses during this little stretch? What? No, because it's a legitimate question. I think one worth asking right now, because I think we can all assume that he's made this roster because Sam Steele is hurt. I think.
Yes.
I think if Sam Steele
that is about 50% of it, I would say.
Maybe
more than 50.
Yeah, if Sam Steele is healthy, I don't believe Lundestrom is on this team to start.
No, because the guys he would be pushing out, I don't think are in roles that the organization wants to see him in.
Yeah. So,
but the fact that they're putting him in this role, just to add real quick here, is that they're putting him in an offensive role that's between arguably the team's 2 best wingers. Actually, inarguably, Silfverberg and Rakell are the team's 2 best wingers, and so that's a very cushy spot. And we've talked a lot about Lundestrom as a potential, maybe a good 3rd line center.
Yeah.
So obviously the team is kind of nudging him in an offensive direction as of right now, which I think is far more intriguing than trying to groom a guy to be your third line center. So that should be interesting.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these roster moves, you could look at them and say that they're eyeing towards the Ducks trying to be competitive this year and trying to ice the best roster that they possibly can. So, if Isac Lundestrom comes out of the gate and is tearing it up, let's say within the first 10 games, if Sam Steele's not back in those first 10 games, he has 10 points. So he's at a point per game pace. Do the Ducks send him down?
Probably not. I think that if he's doing really well, he will most likely be on kind of a week-to-week basis.
Yes.
It's one of those things where maybe they'll let him fizzle out on his own because PDO dictates the roster decisions for the most part, or shooting percentage does. I don't really see him, though, again, unless he really is lights out and isn't just producing, but is also playing a responsible two-way game, which is kind of this, for whatever reason, prospects are held to this kind of perfection standard that veterans are not, where it's like you have to be responsible in your own end, and you have to produce, and this and that. Whereas veterans, once you get to that point, all hell breaks loose. Anyway, tangents aside, I think that Lundestrom most likely. Look, if Lundestrom is down in San Diego, maybe on a line with Daniel Sprong, that's a really good situation. I think once he goes down there, which I do think he will at some point,
probably,
just because of the waiver exemption and the fact that he is still quite green, especially on this team. I think he's going to be in a position to really develop in San Diego, and maybe next season he takes a larger role on this team. It's going to be hard for him just because Sam Steele is obviously kind of the guy who's going to be looked at to be the second to third line center, or even first line center at this point at the rate we're going. What do you make, though, kind of transitioning away from Lundestrom a little bit here, what do you make, though, of Ryan Getzlaf being between two younger players in Comtois and Terry, as opposed to one thing that I think has been interesting in the Dallas Eakins-led camp so far is that the lines have been put in a blender. For 3 years, we saw Randy Carlyle. Really, there was this kind of really set framework of what the lines were going to look like. And for us sitting here recording podcasts, it made it really easy to guess what the lines were going to look like. But now he's kind of turned everything on its head. So do you think, Getzlaf being between two younger guys like Terry and Comtois, does that mean that he's going to be in maybe a bit more of a sheltered role? What are you kind of seeing from that?
I don't know if sheltered. I don't think he's going to get the top competition. I think that the top realistically, I don't really know which line is going to get the top competition, because you could look at each one and say, well, they have this flaw that maybe they won't match.
There isn't really a matchup line.
No, and I think that honestly, we've seen that with Vegas. That I think Gerard Gallant has come out and said where I'm not smart. I think he said this where he's like, I'm not smart enough to go out and match lines. I just tell my guys to go out and play and tell the next line to go out.
That's great.
And so I think there is some merit to that thought process, though, of, well, I'm just going to let my guys go out and play and not necessarily worry too much about the matchups, not overanalyze it, not overdo it with those matchups, and just give my guys their minutes. Let those guys kind of go out, let them play, let them do their thing. I think maybe the defensemen are more what you want to look at for matchups, because I think we kind of almost overhype having a defensive third line. Because at the end of the day, only one of those forwards is going to be matched up actually in their own zone against the other team's line. It's going to be mainly your defense pairings that are going to want to be matched up against other teams' top lines. So I think at this point we almost maybe have it ingrained in us because of the Kessler line, because of, dating back even to 06-07 with the Cup run with the Sammy Paulson line, that there needs to be a checking line. And I think that almost needs to go out of kind of the lexicon, the vocabulary for Ducks fans of having a checking line. I think it's going to more so be you have three lines that are going to be rolling and playing equally. And I think one night it could be the Getzlaf line getting the most minutes. The other night it could be the Silfverberg Rakell line. The other night it might be the Henrique line. And it's more so going to be based upon how they're playing that night. And I think that's the way that it has to be viewed and the way that it has to go. And so kind of backtracking slightly to Getzlaf, I am actually perfectly okay with this because it gives if you're going to have two rookies on a line, I think having them with Getzlaf is good because he's going to be able to tell them where to be. He's going to allow those players to play their game and put them into positions to succeed. Because there isn't a better Getzlaf's up there with some of the best passers in the game. And so if you're looking for someone to be able to feed guys pucks in situations where they can finish, you want to look at Ryan Getzlaf. And so I think that it's just overall going to be good. I think the only thing that line might be missing and that I want to see from Max Comtois is the ability to go in and retrieve pucks. Because I don't really see Troy Terry as Ryan Getzlaf as the best puck retrieval guys. But maybe also the way that that's viewed is those guys aren't going to dump it in. They want to carry the puck in the zone more. And maybe that's the new view for this Ducks team, which is probably the right way to go about it. But if the puck is lost, if there needs to be a forecheck, does Comtois have the ability to get in on the forecheck and retrieve the puck for them? Because that's never been a good part about Getzlaf's game. I don't really foresee Terry as being a guy that can get in on the forecheck. When he has the puck in the preseason, he's done a really great job of protecting it, but I'm not quite sure if he's going to be great at puck retrieval. So that's my only big question mark for that line is who's going to go and get the pucks.
Yeah, absolutely. On the other side of our second break, we are going to finish up here a little bit on the final roster cut notes, and then we are going to give a bit of our season preview, and we are going to jump into some listener questions. Catch you on the other side. Okay, back from the second and final break. So one thing I did want to add to this whole discussion of Ryan Getzlaf is that it will be very interesting to see him between a guy in Max Comtois who to date in the NHL, very limited sample, of course, has not demonstrated an ability to really drive play at 5-on-5 or to be part of an equation like that. It's going to be interesting to see how Getzlaf is going to perform in that context. And Troy Terry, I think, is a good fit next to Getzlaf from an offensive perspective, but there's 3 zones on the ice. And so I'm very curious to see how that is going to mesh. But I do think that this indicates that Ryan Getzlaf's role is not going to be the same this year.
No.
I think that it's going to – there on the PDO cast, which everyone should definitely check out, Dmitry Filipovich has made this comparison quite a bit. And I actually think that we're not maybe quite there yet, but I do see this as being a potential role for Ryan Getzlaf. It's kind of the Joe Thornton role, or the role that Joe Thornton has gotten to, where he's not going to be your top line guy. He's not going to be the guy carrying the load, but he's going to do really, really well in kind of middle 6 minutes, and where the matchup is a little less stringent and focused on him. And with 2 younger guys next to him, that kind of makes sense. That's a better environment. Now, what's interesting though is that means someone's got to take those bigger minutes. And is it going to be the Lundestrom line? Is it going to be Henrique? It's going to be interesting to see. One thing I did want to respond to on your note about matchups. So it's interesting because I do think that Randy Carlyle's system was definitely predicated around some real old school approaches, and not necessarily in a bad way if you look at the personnel. At the time, Kessler, Silfverberg, and Cogliano were in fact a very good shutdown line. It made sense to use them that way, but you also don't want to force a square peg into a round hole. And that's kind of what was happening at the end of his tenure, at the end of where Kessler was healthy, is that line, although put together, wasn't what it used to be. If you look around the NHL now, the best 5-on-5 play driving lines that teams seem to roll out for difficult matchups, it's not always a shutdown line. In fact, it could be the team's top scoring line. So, for example, everyone thinks about the Bergeron line in Boston. O'Reilly comes to mind in St. Louis. And, of course, take your drinks. I'm having to mention the Canadians here. The Tatar, Dano, Gallagher line for the Canadians is their first line that provides the most offense, and it's also a shutdown line. And so the roles have kind of been flipped in recent years, and I think what we're going to see from the Ducks here is going to be more of a just rolling 4 lines, or at least rolling 3.5 lines, we'll call it. Okay. Anything else you want to add here on these final cuts? Or do you want to jump in some previews here?
Really quickly, I do want to make mention. I found it somewhat interesting they're not utilizing the full 23-man roster. They only have 22 guys on the roster with 13 healthy forwards, 7 healthy defensemen, and 2 goalies. So maybe that means that one of Sam Sealer, Andre Kasha, is not as injured or is not that injured, and that they'll be back within a game. And so they wanted to leave an open roster spot so they didn't need to send anyone down to activate them. So just somewhat interesting.
Yeah. And, as far as the blue line, no real surprises there. You were texting me on Sunday, I believe, that you were predicting Josh Mahura was going to make the team.
I was?
Not you were, or you were at least heavily.
I was?
Heavily suggesting it. Oh, no, now you're backpedaling.
Are you sure?
Nice.
No one can confirm.
Classic.
No, the reason why I brought it up was I didn't know what Brendan Gooley's health was going to be, and so I thought
it was fair at the time.
Yeah,
and it was fair at the time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
God, trying to expose me like that? Wow.
I mean, well, who we got to keep it interesting. Okay, so let's look ahead now to the season. So we've done a lot of previewing of this team, so I don't really think that it's worth going super in depth here. But in the interest of posterity, let's do. Give me your kind of just elevator pitch or elevator prediction on the Ducks. What you expect this year?
Well, I mean, do you want to do this? Listener to the show, Alex McKay on Twitter had thrown us a quick little question that basically asking us to do a mini segment on season predictions with the probable, the maybe possible, then crazy long shot.
Well, factor that into your prediction here, your preview.
My preview is that what I see from the Ducks is more basically, I think they're going to come out of the gates hot. I think we're going to see a renewed energy from this team, a lot due to the younger roster, an influx of youth, having guys that are underneath 23, 24 on this roster. The fact that you have a new coach that I think is going to inspire a lot of the guys to play. I think the area that's honestly going to surprise a lot of people is the defense. After looking at preseason, is that I think this defense is a lot better than we were all giving it credit for. I think the third pairing is a little bit questionable, but if Larson can become a pretty good NHLer, then that kind of elevates that pairing. If Gooley Fowler can be good, then that makes that pairing great. And we know what we're getting out of Lindholm and Manson. And so I think there's going to be this kind of wave of momentum to start the season that the team's going to be able to build upon. I think more than likely they're going to kind of hit a little bit of a slump due to the fact that you have a lot of kids. They're not used to the grind of an 82-game season. They're still getting used to that. And so there's going to be a little bit of a slip where the Ducks are going to fall back. But I think at the end of the day, they're going to find their way into the playoff race. I think they're going to be able to scratch their way into a wild card spot, actually.
Oh, he's calling it.
He's calling
it, folks. He's pointing to the rafters, Babe Ruth style.
I think that more things are going to go right for this team. Maybe it's partially because I want to believe in what Dallas Eakins has done with the roster. Maybe it's because I believe in some of the kids being able to come in and score. Maybe it's because I believe in this defense. Maybe it's just simply because John Gibson is one of the best goalies in the league, and he kept the team somewhat close to a playoff race that had no business being in it for some of last year. And so if they can just improve upon that, it's going to be a major move in the right direction for next season or for this upcoming season. I think all of those factors considered, this team could be in the race for the playoffs and probably picks up the wild card spot. Now, once they make the playoffs being a wild card, I don't think they're going to go that far, but I don't think that's necessarily something they should be looking towards this year. I think that being competitive is what's important this year, and letting the kids develop, letting them score goals, finding where your goals are going to come from. A lot's been said about this Ducks team last year being the worst goal-scoring team in the league. And you eliminated Corey Perry from the roster, who, for all of his doubts of goal-scoring, he still could provide you some goals. And so where are the goals going to come from? There's a lot of unknowns in that. Rickard Rakell needs to pick it up again. Silfverberg needs to build upon what he did at the end of last year. And then you need guys like Troy Terry and Max Jones, Max Comtois to start pitching in. And I think that there may be, like I said, a bit of a slump where that's not happening. But I think for the most part, they'll be able to pitch in and score some goals. Bold prediction, I'm going to say one of the kids gets 25.
I think that's pretty reasonable.
Wow.
Given power play time, opportunity. You got to pick your player. I think that's what's bold. Pick your player who gets 25.
Do I got to go home?
He's going to do it.
Do I got to do it? Troy Terry.
I actually think it's the best guess. I actually think it's the most reasonable pick.
It 100% is. Let's go with Troy Terry.
So just to recap, I don't want to mischaracterize your preview here. You have this as a promising team that buys into Dallas Eakins' message and that makes the playoffs.
Yes.
So you're drinking the Kool-Aid.
I think
that's all well and good.
I think if we want to go long shot, lofty goal that probably will not happen is they make the playoffs and John Gibson gets very hot and they win a couple rounds.
A couple? Oh man, he's
he's
just going off.
I didn't say it's gonna happen. This was your crazy long shot prediction.
Okay, so my quick prediction here, since we are running up on time a little bit, 2 words for this season that I think are gonna kind of characterize the year: growing pains. There's gonna be growth. I certainly think that there's gonna be a lot of progression from certain parts of the lineup, the younger players. I think we're going to see guys like Brendan Cooley and Jakob Larson take a significant step forward. We're going to see Troy Terry become just a mainstay in the lineup. I don't necessarily know where Comtois and Jones will be when this is all said and done. Not saying they're going to be traded or anything, but just I don't know whether they'll be in the AHL or just kind of not everyday players. We'll see. I think that there's going to be points of the season where everything is going to really fall into place and it's going to look like, oh my goodness, Dallas Eakins has really hit on something here. And there will also be points of the season where you'll be reminded of this team's youth. You'll be reminded of the inexperience. Now, it's almost odd to label this team as so young because there are still quite a few veterans on this team. But there's enough pieces of the lineup now that depend on the youngsters to where you have to factor them in. So I think it'll be a little up and down. I think that the downs will not be as discouraging as they were last year because you still know the Ducks seem to have a plan. I think that that's the most equalizing factor in all this is I think that there's a purpose, there's a rhyme and a reason for the way this is set up, which is really important for you don't want to be the Minnesota Wild, for example. I think, though, that the Pacific is extremely wide open, but there's also teams at the top that I don't see going anywhere, the Sharks, the Golden Knights, and the Flames. And I think it's going to be a real dogfight to make the wild card spots. I have the Ducks fighting until the end, but just narrowly missing the playoffs. I think John Gibson will be nominated for the Vezina Trophy. And I think, hey, maybe one of the Ducks rookies is going to get some buzz for the Calder. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a learning curve type season.
Here's the interesting question.
Oh, wait, do I have to give my crazy impossible?
Give me a crazy long shot prediction.
I think mine is the same as yours, that they make the playoffs and win a couple rounds on the strength of just some huge steps forward from the young players and, of course, John Gibson and that.
Here's an interesting thing. If the Ducks do make the playoffs, does Dallas Eakins win the Adams?
That's a good question. If the Ducks make the playoffs, he's going to be nominated.
Mm-hmm.
I'll kind of hedge on that a little bit, but I don't see how he doesn't get buzz if he gets if they make the playoffs, especially considering the narrative, of him coming back all the way from where he was in Edmonton, going through the grind of the AHL to then leading an NHL team that's far from a finished product back to the playoffs in a kind of a jam-packed wild card race in the Western Conference. I'm not going to go as far as saying he'll win it, but I can definitely say that he'll be nominated for the award if they do make the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And good for him. I mean, it would be well-deserved because clearly the coaching staff is making a difference at that point compared to last season.
Yep. All right, so let's see if there are any people in the Twitch chat. If you want to throw some questions in, throw them in now. But we'll do the quick little spiel, make it really short. But we do a Twitch stream each and every show. If you want to come and join in live, keep an eye out for my tweet saying we are live. That way you can jump in, enjoy the Twitch chat, kind of ask questions, interact. It's a really good time, really good fun community. And you can also support us on Twitch. If you have Amazon Prime, you get one free Twitch Prime sub each and every month. With that, you get special emotes in the chat, special badge next to your name, and you also just get to join in on the fun time in the Twitch chat. So let's jump into the question. So Joshua's data throws us a question. What do you see is the influence that Daryl Sutter will have on Henrique, the coaching staff, and even Bob Murray? So what do you think? Do you think Daryl Sutter has any impact on this roster? Let's go with that. Kind of a big overarching theme there.
I think it's really hard to say because what's his official title? He's like a consultant.
Yeah, consultant. He was on the ice during training camp.
Yeah, I mean, he gets to skate around, wear a tracksuit,
That was
chat
weird.
it up with guys.
That was weird.
It must be really weird for a Ducks fan, I gotta say.
Yes and no. I mean, at the end of the day, he also was the Sharks coach. He also was the Flames coach. So he's kind of been around, but still was weird because of his most recent tenure being with the Kings.
Yeah, not just. I mean, it's not just that he coached the Kings; it's that he led them to Stanley Cups series against the Ducks.
I'm wondering if it's more weird for Kings fans.
Well, I think everything is weird for Kings fans right now.
Yeah,
just being in the spot that they're in.
I'm pretty sure I saw someone that was a Kings fan complaining about the fact that they hired a coach that was the Sharks head coach.
That must be weird as well.
I don't think it would be that weird. I mean, the Sharks hired the Ducks' first head coach.
Yeah, but I don't think they had a rivalry at that point.
Fair. Go Ducks 10 asks us, would you be surprised to see Zegras with the Ducks or goals at the end of his college season? This is kind of going back to our very first season of doing the show when I made the prediction in November about Troy Terry.
Will you go that far again? Will you go that far again?
About Troy Terry making the Ducks at the end of the year. You know what? Let's do it. Trevor Zegras will be on the Ducks.
I think this is a cocky prediction.
I am less confident in this than I was when I made the Troy Terry prediction. I was way more confident about the Terry one.
Well, let's chat a little bit here about Zegras. So obviously the Ducks the ninth overall pick in this summer's draft. Do you think that maybe he gets a cameo at the end of the season? Where do you think he plays next season? Because obviously he's going to get 1 year of college.
I think he's the one and done in college.
Okay.
I think he's there for 1 year, then goes to the goals next year. And so that's why actually I don't know if I'll say this. I think he's going to be with the goals or Ducks by the end of the season.
Are you a little less confident because of how the Troy Terry experience went?
No. What do you mean how it went?
I don't know. The fact that he had to go back to the minors, that there was some rumblings.
I mean, at the end of the day, the reason why they did it was the fact that he was a highly touted prospect. He could have gone back to college the next year and then been a free agent the next summer. This was one of their big bargaining chips that they had to get him out of college, and they took advantage of it and got him onto the roster to play 2 games and did exactly what it needed to do.
I think my caveat to that would be if the Ducks are in the playoffs at that point or really in the hunt, which I guess I'm expecting them to be, I don't know if we see him get that cameo.
No, I don't think he's at risk of going to college for 4 years and leaving, and that's the main reason why you go ahead and get a guy into a game is to get them out of college. I think he's probably one and done, which may be the exact reason why he goes to the goals on an ATO. But, I mean, there's also the question of maybe you just do it because this is a highly touted prospect and you don't kind of want to screw it up with him. And so you want to keep him happy.
It's also difficult to compare Terry and Zegras just because Zegras was a 9th overall pick.
Yeah.
I mean, Troy Terry is a 4th round pick. There's a pretty big difference between those two. And so
do you think his college season will impact this at all?
I don't know. I also think we're spending a lot of time on this, and we should probably move to the next question.
Really quickly, Joshua's data brought up the reason why he brought up Henrique was Daryl Sutter, I guess, said that he took Henrique under his wing. I think that's interesting and worth noting. So, Knight K37 said, after how many games of Kasha not being in the lineup, do we accept that he might be injury prone and that we should be open to trading him?
He is injury prone. That's not really a debate. And you shouldn't, outside of a really select few number of guys, you shouldn't really be against trading any player because if it's the right deal, then, and you can make your team better, then it's worth doing. The reason why we were both a little skeptical about the Falk trade is because sure, that made the Ducks better for this season, but it didn't really make sense with the developmental curve that they're currently on. And so, I mean, I think Kasha's injury prone. That doesn't change my opinion of him as a player when he's playing, but it does factor into his value, both as a trade piece and just where he fits on the pecking order of this team.
Yeah, 100% agreed. Lewis X209 said, question, do the Ducks go 2-0 on the brief homestand when you factor in that the Sharks will not have Evander Kane?
I mean, I don't know if not having Evander Kane is going to sink the Sharks' hopes against the Ducks. So the homestand is going to be what?
Coyote Sharks.
Okay, yeah, it's Coyotes Sharks. Could they go 2-0? Sure. Why not? I mean, the team has played well in preseason. The certain lines really seem to be gelling. The defense looks good. So let's call our shot here. 2-0 start.
2-0
Dallas
start.
Eakins, Jack Adams buzz right away.
Right away. Playing playing exciting hockey. John Gibson getting the Vezina buzz right away. So I think that's going to do it for questions on the night, and that's actually perfect because we're right nearing the hour mark. So really quickly, I did want to mention that we did get a new podcast review. So for those of you out there that want to support the podcast but don't exactly have the financial ability to do it on Patreon or any of our other avenues, one way that you can also do it is by supporting this or by going and liking our videos on YouTube, subscribing to the YouTube channel, and also by leaving us a podcast review. So if you want to go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review, it helps out more than getting us visibility. So if you search for Anaheim Ducks, we pop up at the front. So that's one way. If you like what you're listening to, leave us a review there. So we got one this past Friday from Trader Sam's Admiral. Said, solid pod, 5 stars, great pod for all us Ducks fans. So thank you so much. That really means a lot to us, actually. Every single one of these reviews. It's kind of crazy. We're up at 114 now.
Yeah, we started at like 12.
Maybe.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we've come a long way. Definitely big shout out to everyone who's left the review so far. And just to echo what Jake said here, obviously we give you a bunch of different avenues to support the show. And a few of them are definitely through financial means. But if that's just not something that you can afford or believe in or whatever your reasoning is, this is a really easy one. It takes maybe 5 minutes at most, and then you're done. You don't have to do it again.
Yeah.
And honestly, it goes a long way. That's one of the metrics that, for example, Apple Podcast uses to expose shows. And if nothing else, it just lets us know how we are doing. And we do want to know that because we put out so many of these shows that they better be good. Otherwise, it's going to be a long season. But all of that being said, a couple other things to check out as we
real quick. We got a good question on Twitter that I had forgot about that I do want to jump in real quick, and it's something that we haven't touched on that I think is important. CMonkey001 said, was the reason for Larson and Holzer's poor performance when called up last year a product of the Carlisle system? And if that is the case, do we think that they can thrive in Eakin's system? So we haven't really touched on the third pairing really at all. So I think really quickly, your thoughts, and do you think that they were hindered by Randy Carlisle?
I think Larson played fine last season. He actually had some pretty good stretches, so I don't think he really struggled per se. And as far as Holzer, I mean, he was just in and out of the lineup. Mm-hmm. So I think there was always a possibility for this pairing to be good. I don't know if they were necessarily held back by Randy Carlisle, but they do seem to be thriving currently under Dallas Eakins.
Yep, and I think that's probably fair. I think that I don't think we got Larson for that much under Carlisle, but maybe I'm just misremembering right now.
He had a stretch in from about, let's say, November to January where he was with the Ducks, and he played over 40 games last year. Mm-hmm. So he definitely got an extended look. Sure. And there were portions of time where he actually looked pretty solid. He kind of struggled at the end of last year, but I don't know. I think even though the Ducks did look good at the end of last season, it's hard to take much away from that.
Yeah.
They were playing without an actual head coach.
Yep.
And so it's hard to say.
Yep. So I think that's one of the things I'm interested to see. So I think that will do it, though, for the question. Sorry about that.
So wrapping up here, make sure to check out AnaheimCalling.com. That's at Anaheim Calling on Twitter. That is, of course, our home base. A lot of good content going up there. Jake, are we going to see your rankings, your world famous weekly rankings anytime soon?
I mean, if the people demand it, I will bring it back. So let me know if you want to see them back.
Yeah.
You just want it back so you can bring it up on the pod.
Yeah, they're fun. I mean, the rankings give people stuff to talk about, and
True.
I'm never against more stuff to talk about.
True.
But yeah, at Anaheim Calling, there's a new wave of writers this season. There's a lot of content going up, and of course, you've got the podcast. So I definitely think it's a good place to check out if you are a diehard Ducks fan. Make sure to check out Jake on Twitter. That's at Reindeer Games 91, where you'll eventually be able to find his rankings. And also one thing that I did want to remind everyone of, patreon.com/acpod, as we talked about at the top of the show. Not going to rehash that too much, but make sure to check that out. And then I'm on Twitter at Felix_Sicard. I've got an article up right now about Gulli and Larson, which you should go check out. I've got it pinned to my profile. So any last notes, Jake? Anything I may have forgotten here?
Nope. Just excited for the Hawks to get back, and the next time we're going to talk to you will be on a post-game episode. Yeah,
absolutely. The season is back. The wait is over. I'm excited for a new season that's about as new as it could possibly be. I mean, new players, new coach, just a whole lot to dig into. So like Jake said, the next time we will talk to you will be after a real hockey game, regular season, Ducks home opener against the Coyotes on Thursday night. Don't miss it. We will talk to you then.
Bye.